Hi, I'm Aaron A. Reed, and I wanted to give you a quick video overview of my new book, Further Explorations 50 Years of Text Games. So, as you might gather from the title, this is kind of a companion volume to my earlier book, 50 Years of Text Games, which was kind of a pretty massive overview of the history of interactive fiction and basically any kind of computer game that's primarily text driven. This is a much smaller book, it's 85 pages long. You can see it's pretty slim. This is the hardcover, it's also available in the softcover. But basically, what this is just kind of a grab bag of cool stuff that couldn't fit in the main book. And originally, this was only available as a perk during their crowdfunding campaign, but it's finally kind of come out in a standalone version that's a little revised and expanded. So you can take a look at the table of contents here. Basically, there's chapters on cool fan favorite games like Planetfall, Anchorhead, and interesting genres of text-based games like hacking simulators. So basically, everything in here is just something that I thought it would be fun to write about, even if I couldn't fit it in the main book. So the Go Stack is a great example. It's a parser game that's pretty famous for making the player learn kind of this entirely invented language to figure out how to operate it. There's lots of cool excerpts and explanations of how stuff works in the game. There's these chapters on different genres of text games, and we've got things like interesting examples of games, in this case wordplay games that do really interesting things with language and writing. We've got A Dark Room, the famous mobile game that kind of was a huge viral hit for a while, talking about the origins and kind of reinvention of that by a second author. One room games, parser games that all take place in a single room. These kind of tied in the history of escape rooms. Planetfall, the Infocom game. You can see here there's an original map of Planetfall. This was a fun one to write about because a lot of people remember Floyd and the relationship with Floyd the robot. We talk about the history of visual novels, which actually started out as parser-based games in Japan, and then evolved kind of into their own thing. We've got a flow chart, some screenshots. Anchorhead is a classic parser horror game that is very well beloved, deservedly. We talk about hacking simulators here. And then another cool thing about this book is some games that are maybe less sort of famous for being, great and more famous for being kind of interesting failures. And I think it's just as cool to learn and write about those kinds of games as games that, everyone thinks are undisputed classics. So Amnesia is kind of a really fascinating story. It was an interactive fiction game written in the 80s by a famous science fiction author that kind of famously was a flop, but it did a lot of really interesting things and kind of was rediscovered a few years ago in a new remake. The Antagonist is kind of another game in this category. This is a pretty obscure game in the genre of type-in games where the whole source code to the game would be printed in a paperback book that you'd have to type in. And we go into this game in particular, but also, the history of type-in, the whole type-in genre with series like Microadventure. We talk about adaptations. There's all kinds of interesting challenges in translating a static book into an interactive structure. And then the last part of Further Explorations is a pretty detailed timeline of text game history. This is something I originally envisioned to go in the main 50 years of text games, but it was just too long, and that book was so long already, I decided to move it off into the second book. But you can see this starts way back in the 18th century with the publication of Tristram Shandy, this kind of famously interactive print-based book. I spent a lot of time compiling this. It's, to my knowledge, the most detailed timeline of interactive fiction history that's ever been assembled. It's got the origins of tools and interesting contests in the community. Less about particular games and more about movements and technology. So this whole timeline is here in the book, which is a great resource, I think. So that's Further Explorations. Hopefully you check it out. It's available multiple places. You can go to if50.techstories.com or just search for 50 Years of Text Games and you'll find how to buy it. And the original book is also still available too anywhere you can get this. Thanks, and hope you check it out and enjoy.